First, good job, folks. Way more short tests this time around. Good work. That means you were working hard, okay? That was point number one. Point number two, right. Question on the floor. How do we deal with what you might call objective truth about your pain versus my subjective experience with it, okay? So, let's say you constantly, great. Let's say you constantly live at like a 5 out of 10, right? And then we're talking about don't exceed 4. It's like, I got up this morning, right? So, there's kind of two ends of this spectrum. And the answer is, we need something relative to you, okay? So, on one hand, you could have somebody who, like, their tolerance is extremely low, right? And they're doing that and they're saying, like, I'm asking, where are you at? Frickin' 8 out of 10, dude. Unbelievable, right? When in reality, it's like they've never lifted a weight before in their life, right? So it's like, okay, we need to respect that, right? And one of the pieces of the process is going to be to, like, build capacity, right? On the other end of the spectrum, right? If you are dealing with something, right, that is like, you're kind of always elevated, right? We need to not be concerned with, objectively what a 0 should feel like. You need your own scale, okay? So you need to be able to identify with, like, okay, where am I at today? This is what 0 feels like for me, okay? So that we can have a scale that's going to be relative to you, right? The goal is that your 0 will someday soon be associated with true 0, right? But to be intelligent with this stuff, like, you need to be honest with yourself. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Cool. Okay. All right, last one here. This is going to tie a lot of this stuff together. All right? So, this lovely diagram here, this is what we call the athlete's hierarchy of needs. And again, I would love to just interchange athlete with human, okay? Because that's really what we're talking about here, all right? So, within this hierarchy, this is basically our bedrock for decision making, okay? This is like our roadmap. This is going to help us determine what is the next right thing to do, okay? So, we want to make informed decisions around things at all times. We're not going to be a fan of throwing darts and seeing if they land, okay? We can be much more sophisticated here, all right? So, at the base of this pyramid, okay, is flexibility. Okay? If you had a guess of what flexibility is, how would you define flexibility?
Can't touch your toes.
That would be an example of flexibility.
Your joints move the way they're supposed to.
Okay?
Range of motion.
Range of motion, there we go. What kind of range of motion? Passive range of motion, right? Passive range of motion. So this is the ability of a tissue or a joint to undergo range of motion with the help of gravity or external load. Okay? So, first things first, we want to understand, again, on a joint by joint basis, what you can do, what you're capable of doing before we start to ask you to do even the most basic of movements, right? So, flexibility. Here's an example, right? You take your finger, you pull it back, right? Here is the flexibility of that joint. With external load, how far can that joint move, right? Second, layer here, what we call mobility. Any guesses what mobility means? How you would define it? Active range of motion, right? So, this is how far a joint can move while you're trying to achieve a certain position, okay? So, flexibility, okay? Mobility, right? How much I can control that range of motion, all right? Now, the difference between these two things, okay? So, this position right here, the mobility of my finger, versus the flexibility, ooh, I got a crack out of that. The flexibility of my finger, okay? That space in between, okay? That is essentially like my risk, essentially. We want to be able to, and like, okay, of my fingers, like relative risk there is pretty low, right? But the difference between these two things is essentially the risk that I am kind of holding, right? We want to be able to control as much of our range of motion as possible, right? So it's one thing to have access, okay, to these positions because of our flexibility, because of our passive range of motion, but really, like, true access would be we have control through that full range. Does that difference make sense? Right? So, thank you. Flexibility, passive range of motion, mobility, active range of motion. The next layer that we're going to start looking at, because again, we're starting from the bottom, right? This is the kind of the first thing we need to look at and address. Once we know, okay, this is what your joint does, okay, then can we take these things into account and how can we start to move, right, with the available range of motion that you do have, okay? Next, this is what we're like starting to dig into today, okay? And this is like where there's a lot of magic, okay? This is what we call strength balance. All right? This piece right here is how we can really start to create the human being who never would have had pain in the first place. Okay? So, if we address these issues, is she leaving?
Yes.
Oh, dang. It's a good thing I'm recording this. If we address these issues here, right? We have access, right, to your joints. We have control, right, through that range, okay? Now, if you can, for example, press a whole ton of weight with one arm and not the other arm, right? And we do things like bilateral pull-ups and with a barbell pressing, right? What do you think is happening when you've got two arms on the one object, right? They're probably not working the same, right? You're probably doing 90% of the work over here, right? And then accomplishing the task of getting both arms overhead without this doing much work, right? Just one example, right? And the more that we allow those strengths to just kind of ride out and get us to the task at hand, right? The more we actually make that problem worse, right? So there's a lot of left to right, front to back, pull to press to all of this stuff. There's a lot of different ratios that we can start to look at and just kind of identify, all right, what's the low-hanging fruit here that we can actually make some change with to start to reshape and rebalance things out. There's a ton that we can do here. And this is like where a lot of the magic is at. Does that make sense? Next, so we would simply call work to recovery. All right? How much are you doing and how much are you recovering from it? I will say there's probably very few people who are going to be completely perfect here. There's probably always work that we can do, but like we can, even if we did get into a great spot here, there's still always going to be this factor. So like if we're still experiencing some kind of problem, this work to recovery ratio is always going to be something that we have to consider, right? So what we need to understand is that we do not get fit from working out. You get fit from recovering from working out, right? When you work out, immediately you are in worse shape than when you started, right? And it is only after you recover from that load, from that intelligently prescripted irritation, it is only when we recover from that that we improve, right? So let's just look at a really basic week here, okay? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, all right? Let's give David some numbers here. We'll say here's a 0, here's a 5, here's a 10, right? Let's say your capacity is at a 5, okay? So if you work out on Monday, okay? Monday's workout, you started at a 5, okay? And let's say you worked out 1 percentage point, right? Or 1 point, whatever. These numbers don't mean anything. Let's say, great, I worked out. Now I'm at a 4, okay? I have to recover up to a freaking 5.1, right? For me to actually be getting fitter, stronger, faster, whatever it is from that, right? So the goal, right, is that I would get up to a 5.1, right? If I'm not recovering, and by my next workout on Wednesday, again, that 48 hours thing that we were talking about, if I'm not back up to there, right, let's say I only get to a 4.9, okay? And then, what do we got here? 4, we got 4.9 here. And then I do another 1 part breakdown, right? By the end of Wednesday, I'm down here at a 3.9, right? And then, shoot, I do it again. I start Friday at a 4.8, right? And I finish that, I'm not at a 3.8, right? And we actually just keep breaking down until you feel completely exhausted and worn out and you have to take a week off to find yourself back at this place that we started at, right? We've got big problems here, right? The goal would be, I should get a different color. The goal in green would be that we break down, right? And by the time we're ready to work out again on Wednesday, right? Just simple 3-day week here. We actually are at that like 5.1, right? And then we break down, right? And we come up here and we continue to climb in that fashion, right? That is the goal, right? We don't have the growth without the work, without the breakdown, without the irritation, right? Without the physical challenge, however we're going to describe that, we need that. That is a component that we need, right? The only reason the gym exists, talking much bigger philosophically here, the only reason this exists is because life, for most of us, doesn't involve things that are physically challenging anymore. We sit at desks, we work with our brains, right? So we gotta do something different to get this into our life, right? We need this challenge, enable to build capacity, right? But we have to be smart about it, right? So, is that a question?
Yeah, so how does that relate to the question that was?
Yes, right. So, Alex is asking, like, hey, I love, right, doing these crazy hard workouts and they're super fun and all this stuff, right? Is there anything wrong with this line right here? No, it's necessary, right? Necessary that we do that. And I would say it's even necessary for this line to have varying degrees all the time, right? If you're a type of person who, like, let's say you, because of your schedule, your behavior, your mental state, whatever, like, I want to be in the gym every day, right? That's probably fine, right? But what we need to understand is you can't be in the gym every day and do this every day, right? That goes into the effort and the output that we're putting into it. That goes into the programming, what you're doing, not doing squatting every single day of the week, right? There's lots of different factors that are going to play into what causes this breakdown and then how that relates to, like, oh, I might have done something a little heavier with a squat, for example, on Monday. That doesn't necessarily mean I can't come in and do, a different workout that's like upper body on Tuesday, right? Those are the types of things that as coaches and programmers, like, we're taking those things into account. That's why we can look at something and say, like, oh, we can potentially work out more than, 2 or 3 times a week, whatever it is. These are all factors that are playing into it, right? But on the other hand, okay, guy like Alex, he wants to do hard workout. Cool. And honestly, like, so think about, once a year we do like the Murph or whatever. Like, that's a drastic big line here, right? Are there other benefits other than the workload that's happening when you do something like that? Heck yeah, right? There's other factors that are playing into it, right? But when we're looking at physically, what's happening, we need to understand that when we do those things, because, and even for what he was saying, like it's fun, to compete, right, and do these things, right? There's an aspect of that that's good for you, right? But we need to understand that, okay, if I'm not going to do anything else, for example, with my sleep, with my food, with maybe manual therapy, like all of these things, right? If I'm not going to do that type of stuff to be able to bounce back faster, right? Like, it might be a few days before I'm ready to hit it hard again, right? Or it might be like a slower climb to get back up to kind of be recovered from that, right? These are things we have to be taking into account. Answer your question?
Yep.
Great. Questions on this before I go to the last one here?
What are some good ways to recover better?
Good question. So the low-hanging fruit, right, is going to, like, I'm going to look to the principles, right? I'm going to be looking at, are you eating well, right? Are you supporting your body through your nutrition? Are you sleeping well, right? I'm going to be looking at also the effort that you're putting in here, right? Are you doing too much, right? Are you going too hard, right? That type of stuff. Is the physical challenge too great? That's going to be the places I'm going to start before getting into, all right, supplementing with X, Y, and Z, doing the massage and all this stuff. Like, those things are great, right? But it's not the first place I'm going, right? There's lots of low-hanging fruit before that. Any other questions about that? Cool. All the way up here, skill. Okay? Once we kind of check these boxes and we still have an issue, then, coach, I just can't figure out the snatch, right? Okay, great. Let's teach you how to snatch, right? There's few people who have problems with the snatch who their chief issue is up here, right? There's probably some joints that aren't quite working right. There's probably some access that we don't have, right? There's probably some imbalance, right? A lot of times we're working too hard and all this stuff, right? Not often is this like the chief issue, right? And there's a little bit of stuff here where it's like, okay, we need some aspect of skill to even be able to do some of this stuff, right? But it's like, it's always kind of reaching back and forth here. There's tons that we need to do before this becomes chief concern, right? Now, here's where we kind of bring this full circle. This line right here is generally, historically, where most of the separation typically happens between the clinician and the coach, right? Generally, you think, come into the gym, right? Like, you're going to learn how to squat, right? You're going to learn how to do all these things, right? And anything that is falling in this area, right, is like, I gotta go see the practitioner for, right? And it's not that, like, I mean, it's not that you can't get help here from there. But essentially what we're trying to do is blur that line a little bit and reach down in here and understand that, like, if we understand this and we're thoughtful about this and we use the tools we have access to here, we can actually kind of tackle this whole thing right where we're at, right? That's not to say that we don't need to understand when it's frickin' appropriate to go get some extra help, right? But it's also to say that there's a lot that we can do. Make sense? What questions do you have? Our mission here at the gym, it's on all your t-shirts. We want to renew the Quad Cities by restoring the health of its people, right? We have seen how the standard American lifestyle has wrecked people's health, destroyed people's health, compromised nearly every aspect of people's lives when it runs its course and goes to its logical end, right? Compromised life, disease, all of this stuff, right? We see that running rampant, right? And most of us deal with it to one degree or another. It's all of the effects of this industrialized lifestyle. We believe that the gym is a beautiful context to fight that battle against that problem, against the chaos brought about by our standard lifestyle, right? This gives us a picture of just kind of how far reaching, how big of problems like that we can actually begin to tackle and deal with in this space, right? Yes, because like we want to be able to help people and stuff, but bigger than that is because there's a big old problem and we want to see people flourishing because we know that's what life is intended to be, and we think we can really do a lot of work to help you get there. Cool? Okay, last two tests. We are doing a front rack step up. Okay, barbell, front rack position. Okay, one leg at a time. Okay, foot on top of the box, standing all the way up to the top of the box. Okay, so a couple rules here, points of performance with these front rack step ups.